Chapter 27. Dangers in the Night. John Hamman, 24. Cretaceous. They arrived back in camp at sundown to find a roast turning on a spit above a fire. John noted they would probably have to go for more wood tomorrow. He sat down in his camp chair with a fresh bottle of whiskey and a much smaller glass than last night. Soon, a plate of sliced meat was brought to him. John sat back thinking of how strange life had become and how well they adapted to it. They'd only been here for 2 days, but he felt that they should return soon. This was only meant to be a test. It would be best to come back with a larger party. They had seen some amazing things, but he worried they had been lucky so far. They had not encountered any of the truly fearsome beasts these times were known for. What would they do then? Could they really cope with just one double rifle? Would even the 500 prove enough against what they might find here? The encounter with the behemoth this morning had shaken him. It had been peaceful, but elephants were also herbivores, and they were not peaceful. Buffalo were herbivores, and they were definitely not peaceful. In fact, they were notorious as some of the most aggressive animals of his time. If Mbembe was out there, there would be a lion large enough to feed on it. His mind made up. John set his empty plate aside. Tomorrow, they would return. They still had to hunt for some ivory to pay for this charade and cover what they were doing. Who knew how long that would take? They had a lot of meat in the camp. That may have been what drew it. The fire had been allowed to burn down low to cook the roast. They should have kept it higher. If they had been back home and had more men, they could have built a wall of thorn bushes around the camp. But their group was small, and nothing like that seemed to grow here. There was no sound, only a flash of movement, and a shape leaped over one of the tents, landing in among the group. It seized one of the men by his arm and began dragging him out of the camp between 2 tents, ignoring the rest, to a place about 30 feet beyond. The man screamed piteously all the way. John had put all the rifles in his tent, intending to clean them. He rushed after the beast into the night. It was dark beyond the tents. He drew the Lancaster from the sheath on his right leg. He couldn't see clearly, but from the man's screams, John thought the beast dropped the man to the ground and appeared to step forward, pinning him with its foot as the head bent down to devour its prey. John couldn't see his gun, much less the sight, so he pointed the long barrels at the monster and squeezed the trigger with both of his fingers, cocking the gun. The flash was bright in the darkness, like a flashbulb from a camera lighting up the scene before him. The predator was about half again John's height, like a much larger version of the small things they had hunted. It walked on its hind legs, covered with feathers, a long crest running down its back. But unlike a bird, its maw was filled with razor-sharp teeth. It aimed down at the man's head. He was pinned beneath its foot, screaming. All this John saw in the flash. He fired 3 more times, not knowing if he even hit it. The battle was lit by bright flashes, but in between, it was darkness, their vision totally ruined. John saw it turn toward him. The last flash revealed it was charging at him, its maw agape, then darkness. It hit him, bowling him over with its mass, but John thought it was as blind as himself at that point. He heard a battle cry from behind, and something leaped over him. He heard an angry squawk from the dinosaur. About then, Manny arrived on the scene with one of the camp lanterns, and John saw the Maasai standing over him with his shield and spear. He had buried its point deep in the monster's chest, but it gave no indication of caring. John reached and drew the Webley from the holster across the left side of his belt. He scrambled to the side to try and get a clear shot. He emptied all 6 rounds into the beast's chest without really aiming. It staggered to the side, and the tracker stabbed it again at the base of its neck. The beast fell over on its side, and the man stabbed it over and over again until it went still. John staggered to his feet, looking around. Both of his guns were empty. He went to the fallen man, calling for Manny to bring the lantern. He was alive. His arm was bleeding badly, and blood welled from a wound on his chest. They carried him back into the camp, and John called for the fire to be built up. They laid him down, moaning next to the fire. The man had deep puncture marks in his upper arm, where it had been in the beast's jaws. The bone was not broken, and although blood was running freely, it was not pumping. They did what they could for him. He cried out when they washed the wounds with gin. At least John had found some use for the stuff. They wrapped the wound tightly with bandages from a small medical kit. On his chest were scratches and a deep puncture into his left pectoral muscle. John went back out to examine the enemy. It was similar to the small game they had hunted, from the same family of animals, but much larger. Its head was quite big, with powerful jaws. If it had wanted to bite the man's arm in two, it could have done so easily, but it had not wanted him to get away. Its body was covered with down, and it had large, long feathers all along its back. But the beast lacked the large feathers on the arms. It did not have the same bird-like appearance. The tail was heavier, without large feathers at its tip. It became bare, like a rat's tail. On its toes, one claw was larger than the rest. That was what had dug deeply into the poor man's chest. John went back to the fire and made his decision. They would not wait. He told Manny to have the men break the camp. They would return now to their own time. They would camp there, where at least they knew what dangers they would face. A lion seemed paltry in comparison to what lurked here. It took over an hour to break all the camp and gather everything together. John made them all stand around him as he set up the device and triggered it, taking them back to their own time.